Hey guys, it's Grim. In this video I'm using a different microphone because my old mic made me sound like a 7th grader. This is my real voice. So I'm going to be going over the racial changes coming to the Elder Scrolls Online. I've been asked about my opinion on the new racial changes a lot, and I decided to make a video showcasing them. As you all know, I play a Wood Elf Cheese Blade, so I'm going to be focusing on the changes that are going to be made to Wood Elf and how it'll affect gameplay.
Hey guys, my name is Grim. Today I want to talk to you about the upcoming race changes, and I'm just going to come out and say it. I think they are a huge buff to my playstyle, and they're not a buff to everyone's playstyle, but they're definitely a big buff to my playstyle, and I think they're going to be an overall improvement to most people that play open world Wood Elf, and I'm really excited for them, and I'm going to try and back mathematically in this video that perspective. For this video, I have created a spreadsheet like I did for the Poisonous Serpent one. I encourage you to go into the description of this video and click on the link for that. It is a view-only document, and I hope that you can gain some insight by looking at the numbers. You're free to correct me if you spot any errors. I invite it, really. That would be very helpful. And I hope that you enjoy going through this together. So I encourage you to pull up the document so that you can follow along with me. And let's go over the proposed Wood Elf changes. So let's start with the base stats. They're largely unaffected. Health and Magicka are staying exactly the same. And we are changing from a 6% stamina increase to a 2,000 point stamina increase. And this is actually going to be very little. This might be a small nerf for you. It'll be a very small nerf if you run like Hulking Draugr. But otherwise, you're probably not even going to notice the difference. For me, it happens to be a small buff. So I run Spriggans and Venomous Ophidian right now, and so I get 4,000 stamina, or 4,000 lines of stamina. 4,000 points worth of stamina in lines, so that's 4 lines of roughly 1,000 stamina each. So that's more than I think a lot of people run, but there are people that definitely run a lot more stamina than that, and to them this might be a small buff. So for me, in the old system, my base stamina that is multiplied off of is 27,476, and so the old buff of 6% would have gotten me to 29,125. The new buff gets me to 29,476, so this is a 351 point buff for me. So that's great. Doesn't really bother me, but I don't think that whether this is a buff or a nerf for you, I don't feel like it's that big of a deal. It's such a small difference, and I do prefer having a higher base anyways. And for me, it just happens to be a buff, because I run somewhat low stamina compared to some other people. Now, the big one is going to be stamina recovery. This one has ruffled a lot of feathers, and people think this is a huge nerf. And I'm just going to tell you straight up, this is only a nerf for you if you play... this is only a nerf for you if you play a super, super high recovery build. And at that point, you shouldn't even notice it, because your recovery is, frankly, way too high. So, let's go through why this is true. The reason that this is a buff and not a nerf is because base stamina recovery is very low, and all multiplicative stats are multiplied by your base recovery. They're not multiplied by the number that you have after another multiplication factor has been contributed to your score. It is calculated separately. So that means that if your default is 500, then you're not getting 500 times like 1.2, then that number times 1.1, then that number times 1.1 again for Relentless. Instead, you're going to get 500 plus 500 times 0.2 plus 500 times 0.1 plus 500 times 0.1. So what this means is that your base recovery matters a lot more than like your buffed recovery. Your buffed recovery does not help you get more recovery. It just helps you have recovery. I hope that makes sense. If you've never heard of this principle before, then hopefully the graph is really helping you right now, because this is kind of hard to explain actually. This is not the first time I've shot this part. This is very difficult for me to explain and try and make sense if you don't understand it. So because our base recovery is so low, a 258 point buff to our base recovery is a really, really big deal. If our base recovery started at 1,000 or 1,500, then this would be a huge nerf, but it's not because our base recovery starts really low. So basically, we are adding to the lesser value here so that we can get a higher multiplication additive to our stats. So this is where the graph comes in handy, and this is what the graph is all about. I'm going to use 2 examples here, and hopefully the key is helping you as well. So first of all, I want to go over how this is going to affect me, and then I'm going to go over how it's going to affect someone that this is a nerf for. So I run roughly 1,233 base recovery, and you can see that value highlighted in yellow on the left side. What this means is that I run default, which is 514, which everyone has as a minimum. Then I'm running dubious, which is 833 total. I also run the Serpent Mundus, that's another 238. And then right now I'm running 1 stamina recovery jewelry. That puts me at 1240 total base recovery. And the closest thing I have in my graph is 1233. So it's like 7 points off, but who cares? It's close enough. And this will demonstrate why this is a buff for me. Unbuffed here is already the turning point in our graph. In the old system, I'm technically going to be doing better, completely unbuffed. So if my base recovery is 1233, then my unbuffed recovery with the old system, which is my base recovery times 1.21, which you can see if I highlight this value, you'll see it pop up in the top left-hand corner here. For those of you who have never used Excel, this is the formula that is being calculated to get this number. So it's the base, which is 1233, times 21%, which is the Euphrates endurance as it exists today. This number is going to be the base number plus 258, which is the proposed change. And you can see the difference between them is 1491.9 and 1491 flat. But I don't run unbuffed. I run with 5 pieces of medium armor. If you're running 5 pieces of medium armor and you have all of the passives unlocked, then you're going to be getting a 20% stamina recovery buff. In the old system, this is an additive value. So you can see the formula is now your base recovery of 1233 plus your base recovery times 0.21, which is going to be a value that's added to this, which would get you 1491.93. Then you're going to add this 20%. And so you add this 20% by multiplying 20% times the base of 1233, taking that number, so base times 0.2, which is 20%, and then adding that back to the value, and that's going to get you this number of 1738. Now, if you were to do the new system, the calculation is a little bit different. The formula is now going to be base base plus 258, because that's the new buff, is that we get plus 258. Then you're multiplying that by 1.2, so 20%. With that value, you're going to get this number here. And that value is 1,789. So you're getting a buff over the old system just for running 5 pieces of medium armor with the Mundus Dubious and 1 piece of stamina recovery jewelry. Now, if you are using CP, this is going to become an even bigger divide. And you can see these purple squares are the turning point where the old system becomes better. So the more buffs you add, you can see the worse the old system becomes, and that's because the more multiplicative stats that you apply, the better and more valuable your base recovery is. So every time that we add a buff, essentially, this new system becomes better. But you only need to add medium armor for it to become immediately obvious that with my base recovery, this is a buff. Okay, let's continue. So you're adding CP. Now the formula has changed to be such. You've got base recovery plus base times the 21 from your phrase endurance, the 20% from medium armor, and now you're also adding this 11%, and you get 1874. In the new system, you're going to get your base plus 258 plus your base plus 258 times medium armor, and then the base plus 258 times CP. And you come out with this higher number of 1953. And then say you're adding Relentless, because I play with 5 medium, CP at 11%, and Relentless. And so in the old system, you'd be getting, here's your phrase endurance, here's medium armor, here is your CP, and here is Relentless, and you get 1997. In the new version, you're going to get base plus 258 plus base plus 258 times medium armor, CP, and Relentless. And you can see I'm now going to receive 2,102, whereas before I received 1,997. So that is a 100-point stamina recovery buff for me. That's a really big deal because it basically means that I can drop a jewelry piece if I'd like, especially if I'm going to add another. So say I add Werewolf, that's another multiplicative buff. That's going to make this change even more valuable. So I can drop some base recovery, put on Werewolf, and have a huge buff to my stam and to my damage. So I'm going to have the same stamina recovery and way more damage, or I'll just have more stamina recovery in this new version. So that kind of begs the question, who is this going to nerf? Well, I highlighted value for that in red. You're going to get nerfed if you are at a base recovery of 1833 or higher, or you're not using any buffs. If you're not using any buffs, this may be a nerf for you as well, but everyone's using some buffs, right? How many people have no medium armor, no CP, and no Relentless? Not many. Not many. So let's take a look at this. How do you get to 1833? Well, the closest I have on my little graph here is 1836. So that's pretty close. So we'll go with that. To get this value of 1836, you have to have Dubious, the Serpent Mundus, 3 pieces of stamina recovery jewelry, and 2 pieces of stamina recovery armor, or at least 2 lines of stamina recovery on your armor. So that could be Eternal Hunt, for instance. So you'd be wearing all stamina recovery glyphs on your jewelry, the Serpent Mundus, Dubious, and then Eternal Hunt. So essentially, you're going to have no damage in this type of build, but you'll have this high base recovery. If you take this high base recovery, you'll notice here on the graph that it is always going to be higher in the old system than in the new, because you're multiplying the super high base recovery by 21%. And that's going to come out to be a much larger number than just 258 or whatever, 258. So if you're running all of that recovery, then you add in your buffs, and if you're using 5 medium armor, 11% CP, so 49 into Mooncalf, and then Relentless, you're going to get in the current system 2,969, and in the new system you would get 2,948. That is a 21-point nerf. So if you're running all recovery stuff, then you're going to be nerfed 21 points of recovery, which should be completely unnoticeable. In order to even notice it, or to get the same type of buff that I'm getting as a nerf, like to get the inverse. So I'm getting 100-point buff here, right? I'm going to get 100 more stamina recovery than I currently have. To get 100 less than you currently have, you'd have to be running 2,233 base recovery. In other words, your current recovery right now, if you were to check your recovery, would be 3,617 with only regular buffs, no continuous attack, nothing like that. If your recovery is over 3,600, you have to rethink your build, but in that case, this is a nerf for you. But at that point, you should probably change your build anyways. So that is kind of a deep dive into the changes to stamina recovery. Hopefully this makes sense. It is really hard to explain. If you have any questions, please let me know. Feel free to make comments, and I'm going to do my best to back this mathematically for you so that you can understand it. But we have one more thing to talk about, and this is perhaps the biggest buff of all. So, I mean, 100 more stamina recovery is great, but it's not life-changing. but this is. In the old system, we received the following perk, Stealthy. And what it did is reduce the radius that people could detect you by 3 meters and increased your damage done in stealth by 10%. That's great and all, but doing damage pulls you out of stealth, so while it could allow you to get some really crazy big combos off, especially since you could guarantee them to be a crit with Cloak, to me this wasn't that big of a deal. It was nice, but it certainly wasn't life-changing. But the new system, the new system increases your stealth detection radius by 3 meters. This actually means that right now, in execution, you can see people who are invisible. You can see people who are using cloak, and you can see people who are using invisibility potions. I don't know for sure if this is how it's intended, but in PTS right now, so if you were to go check yourself, you would notice that if you are standing right on top of someone who's cloaked, you can see them. You can see them through the cloak. And that's crazy to me. That's so strong. Like, Wood Elves are going to be the Nightblade Hunters now. And if you are on top of somebody, they will not be able to cloak away from you. You have to really stick on top of them. 3 meters is not very far. But oh my gosh, being able to see people in cloak is obscene. That's super crazy to me. So that's awesome, first of all. And then on the flip side, after a roll dodge, you gain 20% movement speed for 3 seconds. Right now you're actually getting, so if you were to do this in the PTS, you'd notice that you're getting a buff of 4 seconds. But unlike the bow buff, it activates when you start the roll and not when you finish the roll. So in execution, it's really only 3 seconds. So take that as you will. Maybe there will be a change to that. But right now, that's how it's working. So you get 4 seconds, but only 3 of it is usable. So I'm just going to say 3 seconds. And that is really good as well. Getting an unnamed 20% movement speed buff for 3 seconds is fantastic. And it's going to mean that because it's unnamed, it stacks with Major Expedition. So if I was to be a Wood Elf, like I am, and roll using up my bow, I'm going to get a huge buff to my speed for 3 seconds, and then continue with the normal buff to my speed for another 1.5 seconds or so. So that's really strong, and I think that's going to make Wood Elf the #1 open world medium armor 2H bow Stamblade build. Like, it's going to be so powerful. Wood Elves are going to have so much movement and freedom, and if you combine that with their reduced fall damage, which is minuscule but still kind of fun, no one's going to be able to kite like Wood Elves can, and I think that's a lot of fun. So pairing that with an increase in stamina recovery, it's going to be great. I can actually reduce my stamina recovery now, because the buff to stamina recovery means that I can be more excited. I'm going to get a bigger buff the lower my base is, essentially. So I can take away 1 stamina recovery jewelry, add in more damage. I'll still get a buff to my stamina recovery, and I'm going to be able to run around so quickly and have more damage and better recovery. So I'm really excited. I think this is a very strong buff for Wood Elves. I don't know if it's going to stay like this, you know. This isn't out yet, and even if it is out, you never know if it's going to stay like this. But as it is now, as it's written, this is a really big buff for Wood Elf, and a lot of people just don't see that, and they think this is a big nerf, and I can't understand why. So hopefully, if you're one of those people, this video has helped you. There's nothing wrong with thinking that this is a nerf, but I think you're wrong. It's going to be a nerf for people who are super high in sustain, and it's going to be a nerf for gankers as well. If you're someone who only gets kills by stealthing and relying on a really fat snipe from stealth to get that 10% damage, then yeah, this is going to be a nerf for that playstyle. But for the average Nightblade, who's running around using a variety of weapons and a variety of strategies and being really, hit and run, as I kind of think Nightblade is intended to be played, then in that case, this is going to be a fantastic buff for you, and I think you're going to really enjoy the changes this upcoming patch. Please let me know if you have any questions. I want to thank Devout for recording some extra audio for this video. I thought that was so funny. He was hanging out in my Discord with me, and I said I had to go to record the audio, and he's like, "I'll do it for you." So I agreed. I agreed. And, well, that's how you got that wonderful gift. So please feel free to come join us in Discord. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for all the people who have supported me and sent me shells. I'm a big collector of Mother of Pearl because I need it for my gold food, and man, it's a drug for me. So thank you, artist, for the beautiful sketch and for the drugs. I appreciate it. Everyone, have a great day, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.